Picture this: a Roman senator in the year 301 AD, walking through the forum, brushing off concerns about inflation. "Rome is eternal," he says confidently, clutching coins that have been watered down so many times they barely contain any silver. Within less than 2 centuries, the Western Roman Empire would cease to exist. Fast forward to 1910. A British official in London, managing an empire where the sun never sets, laughs at the idea that Britain could lose its global dominance within a generation. By 1945, that empire was collapsing. Here is what is unsettling. Both Rome and Britain showed the same warning signs in their final decades, signs that look eerily familiar in America today. Every major empire in history has followed a similar pattern before its decline, and the United States seems to be checking the same boxes. Rome lasted about 5 centuries. The British Empire around 2. The American century, we're roughly 80 years in. History doesn't repeat, but it sure rhymes. And the rhythm right now feels uncomfortably recognizable. This matters because understanding how empires rise and fall isn't just a history lesson. It directly affects your life, your savings, your future, and even global stability. When empires fall, the ripple effects last for generations. Jobs vanish not because of local politics, but because global trade shifts. Currencies that were once rock solid turn to paper. Wars break out as rising powers challenge the old guard. Your purchasing power depends on the dollar's global status. Your safety depends on the balance of power America helps maintain. And your quality of life depends on whether the middle class thrives or erodes. Empires don't just disappear. They drag their citizens through economic, social, and political chaos on the way down. Every fallen empire has 5 red flags that flash before the crash. And right now, those same signals are flashing in the US. Let's start with the first: currency debasement. Rome's downfall began when it started financing everything from wars to welfare by watering down its coins. Under Nero, a silver denarius was 95% silver. By the time of collapse, it was only 5%. It's like running out of beer at a party and topping off each cup with water. At first, no one notices. But eventually everyone realizes they're drinking a weak imitation and they stop trusting you. That's what happened to Rome's economy. The coins lost credibility, trade slowed, and people turned to barter. Now look at the modern version. In 1971, President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Since then, America's currency has been backed only by faith. Faith in its institutions. National debt has exploded from under $400 billion to over $36 trillion. The Federal Reserve created trillions more out of thin air to fund crises and wars. Rome's debasement took 200 years. Ours, about 50. Then comes the second red flag: military overreach. Rome stretched itself thin, maintaining legions from Britain to the Middle East. By the 3rd century, the army consumed 3/4 of the empire's budget. Britain did the same, defending territories on every continent until the costs overwhelmed its economy. America today spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. 750 bases, 80 countries, endless commitments. Afghanistan alone cost over $2 trillion and ended in scenes that looked hauntingly similar to Rome's final retreats. Empires don't collapse because they lose a war. They collapse when they can't afford to keep winning. The third red flag is internal decay. Rome didn't just fall from outside attack, it rotted from within. Civic virtue died. Citizens stopped serving, stopped believing, stopped caring. Wealth concentrated at the top, and ordinary people lost their sense of belonging. Britain's unity fractured after World War I, and its empire followed soon after. Sound familiar? America's social fabric is tearing apart. Trust in government, media, and even neighbors is at record lows. The middle class is shrinking. Politics feels tribal. The United States feel less united every year. As historian Will Durant said, civilizations die from disbelief, not conquest. When people stop believing in their system, decline is inevitable. And when empires weaken, others rise to take their place. Rome's collapse didn't end civilization, it reshuffled it. Germanic tribes built new kingdoms, Byzantium carried the torch, and Islamic empires flourished. Britain's fall made way for America's rise. The question now is, who comes next? China's rise is unlike anything seen before. Industrial growth, global infrastructure projects, digital currency experiments, and a rapidly expanding navy. Russia, India, and other regional powers are moving to fill power vacuums. The world is shifting from one dominant empire to many competing powers, and history tells us that these transitions are rarely peaceful. Then comes the financial fallout. When Rome's currency failed, trade broke down, cities shrank, and people reverted to survival economies. When Britain's pound lost reserve status, the world had to rebuild its entire financial system around the dollar. If the dollar falls from its throne, the shock could be global. Most trade is priced in dollars. Most reserves are held in dollars. If trust collapses, trillions could come flooding back home, triggering inflation and chaos. And beyond the money, there's something even more subtle: cultural loss. When Rome fell, knowledge vanished with it. Engineering, medicine, even language fragmented. When Britain declined, global networks dissolved and influence faded. America's dominance in science, technology, and culture relies on its institutions and stability. If those crumble, we risk losing not just power, but memory. The know-how, innovation, and spirit that made America unique. So, is the US next? History suggests no empire escapes decline forever. The signs are there: a weakened currency, endless wars, a divided population, and eroding trust. But unlike Rome or Britain, today's collapse would unfold in an interconnected, nuclear-armed, digital world. What took centuries before could happen in decades, or even faster. That doesn't mean it's hopeless. Rome might have survived longer if it had reformed its spending. Britain might have managed a smoother transition had it adapted sooner. Awareness is the first step toward course correction. The real question is whether Americans can recognize the pattern and act before the tipping point. Empires rarely fall overnight. They fall by 1,000 small choices to ignore reality. The myth that this time is different has destroyed every great power in history. The choice now is whether America becomes the exception or just another verse in the same old song. If this made you think differently about history and the present, take a second to share your thoughts. What do you think is the closest parallel between past empires and modern America? And do you think this time could actually be different?